Imagine a world without music, without news, without knowing what's happening in the world. Today we are here to talk to you about the radio. Through our extensive research we conducted and gathered substantial information pertaining to the radio. We will now present the history of the radio's significance in technology, how it has changed the way we communicate, and how the radio changed human behavior and the radio's influence society as a whole.
1873, James Clerk Maxwell predicted the propagation of electromagnetic waves, aka radio waves. 1887, Heinrich Rudolf Hertz first demonstrated the transmission through radio waves. 1894, GM built the first complete commercially successful wireless telegraphy system based on airborne Hertzian waves. December 24, 1906, Regliman A. Fresenen sent the first long-distance transmission of human voice and music from a station in Massachusetts to Virginia. Now that we know the history of the radio, let's talk about the significance in technology.
Radio has allowed listeners to be informed about current events. On December 7, 1941, there was an attack on Pearl Harbor. The radio has informed listeners about the attack faster than the newspaper. On December 8, 1941, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt delivered his post-attack December 7, 1941, a day which we will live in infamy speech to the nation via radio. On a state of emergency when phone lines are cut and power is out, emergency radio that runs off of emergency battery power can still inform listeners about evacuation sites of food and water distribution sites after disasters. According to Farm Radio International, radio remains one of the best communication tools to the rural poor. In Kenya, 80% of people have radios in their homes, but only 7% have internet. Now that we know the significance of the radio, let's discuss the way the radio changed the way we communicate. Prior to television or the internet, radio was the fastest way to receive news to the next to the newspaper. Advantages of the radio over newspaper were that listeners didn't have to wait the next day to receive the news. Two-way radios, unlike a broadcast receiver, where it can only receive a radio transmission, two-way radios can transmit a message and receive a message. With the use of any encrypted code, this can allow the transmission to be more private and can be selectively used between parties, which makes it popular for emergency service and military use. With entertainment, before iPods and Pandora was widely used, radios allowed listeners to listen to different genres of music without having to purchase records or musicians. Listeners could also listen to talk radio, which unlike news delivers information on our partition side of discussions or issues. Now that we know how radio changed the way we communicate, let's talk about how
it affects human behavior. According to Urban Sound and Global Minds, radio listeners actually pay attention to what they hear on the radio. According to that research, 92% of the AM and FM radio audience stays tuned when the commercials come on air. Radio listeners feel personally connected to their favorite radio stations. The radio changes human behavior depending on the kind of things that they listen to from adolescence. Exposing children to radio teaches them about the world. For example, if a child grows up listening to the news on the radio and classical music stations, it is said that the child is more likely to grow up more intelligent and sincere. The radio helps an individual gain knowledge on a certain topic. The FCC, or the Federal Communications Commission, sets communication rules and policies as directed by Congress and works with providers and organizations as they help and develop and also implement industry standards. The radio helps us know what is happening with the weather, traffic, sports, and current events happening around the world. Now that we know how the radio affects human behavior, let's talk about how radio influences society. Communication, according to the worldwide, the website studyworld.com, the news and the listening, we hear the news and can listen to different opinions of controversial subjects. The use of radio in America has drawn cultural lines, with different stations such as Spanish stations that only talk and play music in Spanish that excludes an entire audience from listening to that station due to not being able to understand the lyrics or words said on that station. Or a Christian station that solely plays Christian music or liturgies that excludes the Jewish community, which according to USA.com is the second largest religious group in the United States, which is about 2% of the US population. In conclusion, we have discussed with you the history of radio, its significance in technology, how the radio has changed the way we communicate, how the radio has changed human behavior, and how the radio influenced society as a whole. Now we will end with a quote by Bob Uecker. On TV, the people can see it. On radio, you've got to create it.